Hello. We'll talk now about an interesting topic, in my opinion. What I would like to call cyberpunk architecture. There are references to this kind of architecture here and there, but maybe the phenomenon deserves a more a more elaborated analysis or approach. So cyberpunk, the very word itself, cyberpunk, is a subgenre of science fiction in a dystopian futuristic setting that tends to focus on a quotation combination of low life and high tech, featuring futuristic technological and scientific achievements such as artificial intelligence and cyberware, just juxtaposed with societal collapse, dystopia, or decay. I mean, this combination between low life and high tech is provocative enough. In fact, the word punk means not just an aggressive form of rock, but also a worthless person. But the combination between cyber and punk is, I think, interesting. Lawrence Person, I guess a writer or a critic, said has attempted to define the content and ethos of the cyberpunk literary movement, stating, I quote, classic cyberpunk characters were marginalized, alienated loners who lived on the edge of society in generally dystopic futures where daily life was impacted by a rapid technological change, an ubiquitous data sphere of computerized information, and invasive modification of the human body. The word itself, cyberpunk, its etymology it's clear, it's composed of cyber plus punk. It was coined, the word cyberpunk, by American writer and software developer Bruce Bethke as the title of a 1983 short story and later popularized by Gardner Dozois, if I pronounce well his name. And I actually thought of, initially I wanted to show examples of cyberpunk architecture, but the most interesting pictures belong to Gothic cyberpunk architecture or cyber Gothic architecture. And the Gothic elements are those that are intriguing because, you know, on one hand, the high-tech developments, and on the other hand, the Gothic ethos, the Middle Ages, when Europe had the last if not the only, the last period where in its history when, as Kumaraswamy, an Indian critic of culture and art, said, the Gothic cathedrals were the European example of something similar to the builders or the buildings of the Hindu temples or the Asian temples, that a collectivity worked together anonymously to build incredible buildings. But what does this have to do with high tech? And indeed, this combination between high tech and low life is provocative itself, because you would say, you know, high tech contributes to civilization, to elevating the level of life for everybody, and so on. And so, again, how do you marry, you know, the optimism of high tech with the low life that the word punk evokes? And the architecture that you know was illustrated in you know, movies, comics, literature, is an interesting combination between, in a way, lack of spirituality and its presence, because the Gothic is usually connected with the Gothic cathedrals. When one thinks of the Gothic times, cannot ignore the Gothic cathedrals. But the Gothic cathedrals were architectonic expressions of a longing for God that the collectivity had and served with all sacrifices. But in this case, we have high tech, we have high-end, aspirations and possibilities. We have tools extremely sophisticated, but that God that existed in the Middle Ages does not exist any longer, if we are to be honest. Although there are some exceptions, if we think of the efforts that Barcelona makes in order to continue the Sagrada Familia. But if we look at this image, what do we see? We see these towers which grow towards a darkened sky, but in the far distance there is some light emerging. It could be seen as some kind of a dystopian landscape. We can build anything, but somehow a true purpose seems to be missing. And we have we have darkness. Most of the images of cyberpunk architecture are dark. Dark explicitly or factually and metaphorically or psychologically. How would a city be if it was like what we look at here now? There were, very well received movies that evoked, a cyberpunk sensitivity, like Blade Runner, but there were others. And there also you have some kind of a strange cohabitation between high tech and low life, between humans and machines. I think the fact that cyberpunk architecture finds a relationship, a possible relationship with the Middle Ages, with the Gothic sensitivity, with the Gothic aesthetics, with the Gothic cathedrals even. This is, I think, worth exploring. Why is it so? That when we develop technology and develop it and develop it and develop it, but somehow echoes coming from before the Renaissance, meaning the Middle Ages, from the Gothic times, are still with us, and maybe increasingly so. Middle Ages, but we could go even further backwards to the Dark Ages. So maybe there is some kind of a premonition that a very developed society technologically could also be plunged into some kind of a psychological night. Dystopia, frightening as it is, could also be attractive. There is a seductiveness even of the apocalypse. So maybe the self-destructiveness of man, of the human being, finds some kind of a vehicle through these, dystopian visions. This is a real cathedral, but this is what we imagine now. A darkened. It's almost like a Gothic cathedral without a God to aspire towards. Darkness, a lot of electricity, but the darkness still manifests itself. And look at the architectonic aberrations, because you have the deviant part of the human psychology which needs to manifest itself. And we look at some possibilities or examples right now. there are satanic representations. There are, I think this was produced, this image by artificial intelligence. And I have several images that were produced by AI. This one, I think, as well. I find the subject very interesting, and I'm not prepared now to, because I didn't reflect sufficiently on the subject, but I think it's an invitation if we are concerned about what we call the future, perhaps cyberpunk architecture could unleash, various kinds of approaches to architecture that at this point we do not address. There are hellish images here, I mean, it's possible that the creators of these images and the creators of the cyberpunk literature and the creators of the cyberpunk films have visions that could agitate us, because they are certainly not the promise of that technology which frees us for a paradisiacal horizon of hope, where everything works fine, and everybody will have a very opulent life, and there will be everything will be clean. There will be no garbage. There will be no dirty street or dirty corners of buildings. No, everything will be under the control of the human beings. And look what the human beings do now. In the 21st century, they envision something which is the very opposite of that technological or techno-optimism that many people still believe in. I mean, would we like to live in what we look at here now?
I believe not.
Yeah, it's hard to wish to live in such a city, but we are very capable of creating it, of building it. Tomorrow we'll talk about Andrea Palladio and Adrian Smith, the builder, the architect of the tallest building in the world. And we will have an occasion to confront two architectures and two people and two societies and two times. But there must be some truth in this visual and aesthetical turmoil that the cyberpunk architecture illustrates. The Gothic cyberpunk geisha outfit, I also brought some images which are not directly architectural, but I think it's important to connect the buildings with possible human characters or human postures or human attires even, because there is a whole I found them, the Gothic cyberpunk geisha outfit in various modes. She appears in Japan. Some people think, from Japan, they think that it's a cyberpunk society or a cyberpunk civilization, at least in some parts of Japan. And maybe not just Japan, Of course, cyberpunk is also connected with exoticism. And then we look at human silhouettes or human beings that are exotic, at least for Europeans. So I think there is a vast field to be explored here. You know, the relationship between architecture and exoticism, the relationship between architecture and technology, high-tech technology, the relationship between high-tech architecture and low life, the relationship between so-called success and you know, punks, meaning so-called worthless people, because you know, the paradox is that even if our tools progress and progress and progress, we as human beings do not have a similar progress at all. Futuristic cyber goth love fantasy style by this artist, Matthias Hauser, a futuristic cyber goth, meaning, you know, cyber gothic love fantasy. So we see these beings who are, you know, half beings, half machines, maybe closer to machines. Um, the presence of neon lights in cyberpunk architecture is, you know, persistent. So maybe we can explore the theme of neon lights. You know, of course, you need mainly the night in order for the neon lights to assert themselves. But here we see insinuations of the neon lights even in the physiology of the characters. Are they still human beings? Not really. And back to the Gothic, you know, flesh, to the Gothic spire, to the Gothic verticality, which, in the absence of God, in the absence of, you know, faith, actually, become almost absurd. The last word of the Bauhaus Manifesto by Walter Gropius, written in 1919, was actually faith. That was the last word translated from German, faith. And twice in that manifesto, Walter Gropius used the word heavens, and it's a short manifesto. But was he thinking of what we look at here? I doubt it. Maybe unconsciously, the creators of these images um, long for God. Otherwise, why would they employ a, you know, a Gothic form of aesthetics? And many of these interiors and exteriors belong to cathedrals or cathedral-like buildings. This is also an image produced by AI. Steampunk architecture. This is a derivation from cyberpunk, steampunk architecture. Here it is. Sorry. Uh, we see again the influence of exoticism and the, you know, the Gothic visual theme. Plus
Yeah,
steam.
but sorry to interrupt, but I have a question about these two. Can you give me a main difference between cyberpunk and steampunk? Because I see only similarities between those two?
Well, no, steampunk is actually a branch of, a particular branch. It's still cyberpunk, but I found it being described, this picture, as steampunk. It's still cyberpunk, but, like a branch of cyberpunk. Somebody called it steampunk. It's not that it's a different style or a different, thing altogether. No. Neon cyberpunk architecture, yeah, where you have so much darkness, you need light, artificial light, and neon light somehow appear to be, more futuristic, and that's why I guess neon lights are present in cyberpunk aesthetics maybe more often than other forms of light. And again, the cathedral, but a cathedral that is, fragmented, and these are shards of a cathedral in a way, because faith itself is broken into shards. But the aspiration is still there. It doesn't matter the dark horizon. It's still an aspiration towards some kind of an above, or below, or both. There is death, of course, there is the cemetery, there is the temple, there is the cathedral, there are lights, but true signs of life as we would like to live aren't here. And there is also fright. Well, today is Friday, so maybe we chose the right day to talk about this. Somehow the Middle Ages and the Gothic times are in the collective unconscious presented or present as because the proximity also to the Dark Ages. We connect the Gothic time somehow with some form of darkness, but if you look at the illuminations, illustrations for sacred texts, the Bible, actually there is a lot of light there very often, and people work the land, and or they they have celebrations, rural life, but very luminous actually, and even joyous, and with a very positive innocence and naivete. But what we look at here is very different. I mean, really, death is close. There is, the presence of death can be felt. The mushroom people, well, are they real people? Are they machines, machineries, mimicking human silhouettes? Cyberpunk beings. They are dancing, but there is some morbidity here. The darkness in the human soul continues to exist. Doesn't matter we have, supersonic vacuum cleaners or whatever. And you look at this picture with a metropolis in a cyberpunk mode, and we look at that person there, that human silhouette with the back towards us, and we are reminded of a famous painting by a German painter, Caspar David Friedrich. Caspar David Friedrich, or David Friedrich, is this painting. So between this painting, this man contemplating the abyss, like a gentleman, but contemplating the abyss, and this man here contemplating the abyss of a civilization which in a way ran out of control. I will show a few more pictures of the works of Caspar David Friedrich because I think they are relevant to the subject. There is melancholia, there is death, there is the cemetery, there is the ruin. So this kind of mode is not new. It existed maybe since humanity. But now we have also the presence of an exacerbated technology, but the psychological mode is similar to the ones depicted in these paintings and to the ones present or presented by human imagination at various times during its history. The cross, the cemetery, the ruin, the broken cathedral. Caspar David Friedrich. This is also by him, a painting by him. There are these days certain buildings which are not too distant from what we look at here. And back to cyberpunk imagery. The darkness in the human soul finds expression in these images, or in these images as well. So the constant that the darkness in the human soul is manifests itself in various forms. And cyberpunk aesthetics illustrate this. There are echoes also from, I mean, not just the cathedral, but also, habitations that mimic in a way the Gothic types. This also happened in the expressionist German movies, like Hans Pelzig did, very, very telling stage design in this mode, the Gothic darkness. And what we look at here is almost the tower that Adrian Smith built, and I will present it in detail tomorrow, because it will be his birthday on the 19th of August. So how do we marry? How do we understand the congruence between these taller and taller and slimmer skyscrapers and these houses, yellowish houses in the foreground? Maybe the yellowish house is our soul. I mean, we build these things behind, taller and taller. but our soul is still contorted. And perhaps very sad. And then this is love, cyberpunk love. A couple. Are they happy? They don't look too happy, and he looks closer to death. So the lonely low life in the age of high tech seems to be, adequately presented by cyberpunk aesthetics. The dark city, and the cyber font or fonts, because even the font itself, changed in a kind of in a futuristic Gothic way. Cyberpunk factory. I don't know exactly what they create in this factory, maybe some kind of robots. Sensuality and the machine. And then a stunned human being. And then the monster. The monster, I found several images with similar monsters. This one, and this one. Now, what do these monsters represent? El sueño da razón produce monstruos, wrote Gaudi, not Gaudi, sorry, Goya. These monsters were produced by the human imagination, which also produced the skyscrapers behind. The viscerality of the monster, the towers behind neglect, but this viscerality, monstrous as it is a reality of the human psychology, of the human soul, and maybe of the human life, and it should be expressed before it becomes exacerbated, like in these images. Do the schools of architecture talk about the monstrous side of life or the monster within? Maybe they should. Peter Eisenman did in his grotesques, or when he wrote En terror firma. Not en terra firma, but en terror firma. And terror could also manifest itself, in a more colorful ways, but not necessarily in a more optimistic way. Cyberpunk architecture. There are many things here except simplicity. We just see the word simplicity. And there is even a heart, as if there is such a thing as simple love. There isn't. And at the bottom, the game station. What are we to do without games? And the cyber club, humans and robots. The cyberpunk city. And back to the image that we started the presentation with. Not too much nature here, not too many trees, not too many flowers, but just human constructions, taller and taller, slimmer and slimmer, and more exasperated somehow, and sad, actually. Look at these towers. Who would want to live in such a city? Cyberpunk architecture. A lonely silhouette. The lights are on the buildings, but the person there is very alone, as we can see. The loneliness in the big city. This city, which ran out of control, built by man. Tokyo or New York City or who knows what other city. Plenty of advertisings, plenty of banners, plenty of neon lights. And this is actually in Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, the Sony Center, which some people think has some elements of what is called cyber architecture. Actually, the engineer who worked on this canopy that you see here illustrated became a friend of ours here on Zoom, Bruce Danziger. I regret he is not here now to tell us a little about this work, which didn't quite satisfy him, but it appears in the illustrations of the cyberpunk architecture. And I think this is the last image of this incipient attempt to address this subject, cyberpunk architecture. And again, this is an image from the Potsdamer Platz from the Sony Center in Berlin. Thank you.